Filling it in, sermon title, related to the passage, but to a lesser extent, I think today, based on that passage and not delving into the passage as a responsible minister should. This week, my thoughts were all over the place, scattered and fragmented. First, because I was thinking that the 23rd of September, that's yesterday, was going to be the end of the world, according to some people. So today, if it was the end of the world and we're left behind, I say this is not a bad crowd to be with. I hope some others were taken. That in a lighter vein, planet Nibiru doesn't exist, and it didn't therefore crash into planet Earth. There were a lot to really weigh down one's constituency and much food for thought. The talk about nuclear war, I think, cannot be ignored, and for me it was alarming in the way in which it was conducted. And then there were natural disasters, a few earthquakes in Mexico with quite a high death toll and immense destruction, as big earthquakes have as a result. And then also the hurricanes that brought destruction like we're no longer used to. We've had more or less a decade of, relative calm. During the week, I realized how connected on a global scale our lives have become. Apart from being bombarded by news about these disasters, just in our small church community, I text Steve Whalen Tuesday evening, asking him, is your brother okay? Because his brother lives in Mexico City. Steve didn't respond, which was of some concern to me, but he responded with an email at 2:40 a.m. that morning, the Wednesday morning. I didn't read the email then, if you were wondering. I read it the next morning around 5:30, and what surprised me, Steve showed up for the men's conversation group that we have on a Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. And he said his brother was fine. Fortunately, no major damage to where they live, etc. That evening, I also phoned Nancy Preble-Barrett, because when we visited her and Wayne in Rockport, where they moved to last year, a few weeks ago, they said Irma didn't do much damage to their home that they have on Puerto Rico, because it was on the south shore of the island. But they were going there to check on it. And after what happened with Irma, I was concerned when I saw the track of the hurricane, of Maria. So I called Nancy, not expecting to get somebody on the other end of the line, and she answered her cell phone, and she said they had to evacuate, and they were holed up in a hotel close to the airport. They couldn't get out, too many flights canceled, and those that were not canceled, were totally overbooked. I texted her several times, but as you know, the cell phone towers were down, etc., so I didn't expect to hear her. And last night she called me and said they're still in the hotel. They have water. Water is beginning to run low in the hotel, but they have food, and they have a rental car with a full gas tank. to do the half-mile drive to the airport. I hope to get out by Tuesday. There were also several of our members affected by deaths due to the opioid crisis. Several families that experienced the death of young people due to the drug problem we're experiencing, the resurging one. And then an image that stuck with me, that still haunts me, was a BBC news snippet on the famine in Yemen. 2 million children starving to death. We don't hear about it. And it was particularly haunting for me because of our close support for Saudi Arabia, who is primarily involved there, and it's always difficult to take a complicated situation and say that's because of that, but they have a big hand in the starvation that is taking place, 2 million children. So we do not live in isolation. We live as a community connected to what happens in the nation and what happens in the world. More so, I think, than in past years because of many reasons, but mainly technology and the interconnectedness and the improved communication systems that we are all enjoying, but also loathing in some instances. That you're always connected, everybody can always reach you and tell you what's happening, whether you want to know it or not. What also kept my mind busy, as I've mentioned, was the fair booth. And I, after the Bible study on Tuesday, I had a long conversation with Connie. So, right, Connie, how are we doing? Do you need people? Where can we help? And Connie gave me a full report on everything and expressed some concern. And I gave her a little bit of a pep talk and said, no, it'll happen. You don't have to worry, Connie, even though I was concerned myself. And from a church perspective, the fair can be seen as a big hindrance. You know, you have the long summer where everybody disappears with or without cottages and homes anywhere else. People lay low, which is understandable. And then you fire them up through homecoming to an extent. It's all right, let's go. Let's start working towards Christmas. And then the fair happens. And everything goes back to where you started. You have to prime people again and get them going. So the fair is, from a flow of the life of the church, not the most welcome thing from a certain perspective. But on the other hand, thinking with all these fragmented things that I mentioned, I thought to myself, you know, the fair in a certain way brings all that together. It is an expression of being church. Because through the fair we support at least 50% of our annual budget for missions, which is 60,000 more or less, depending on the year. And the fair normally brings in a net income profit of between 25 and 30,000. So through what is done at the fair, we are able to reach many people. Many of those in the situations affected by the ills of society, also by natural disasters. It is also, apart from connecting us through that, an opportunity where we build community. when I arrived here at Topsfield, I looked at it and said, you know, for all the hours going into this, this is not the best or the most effective way to spend your time as a congregation. If you get a number of people to contribute a few checks, you'll easily make up that money. I didn't say that from the pulpit or with, fanfare. I just discussed it with some leaders. Some agreed and some said, no, it's an excellent community building exercise, and it's fun. And as I got involved, my first year probably over-involved, didn't sleep much, Krista and I, that week or that 10 days. I tend to side with those that say, yes, it's an excellent community building opportunity. For those who are salted dogs in the enterprise of the fair, getting to know people that they perhaps sit with in a pew but never greeted so far, to get to know them in a different setting. Also for those newbies who don't know what the fair is about, like one of our neighbors that I hassled until he signed up to work a shift. He signed up for Jack of all trades on a Sunday evening. He said, well, I guess Sunday evening is quiet and Jack of all trades is easy. You don't have to know anything about anything. But for the newbies, it is an opportunity to learn the jargon, to become part of the process, and to be integrated in our community. And as I was looking at that spreadsheet, the Google sheet, the fair started to fill in for me some of what it means to be church in this day and age. I think very important for us is to acknowledge that being church is, in essence, being community of a very specific kind. That kind of community that Ruben Alves, whose one poem I included here in the beginning of the responsive reading. The community of men, women, elderly children, and newborn babies, a first fruit, an appetizer, an embrace of God's future. That is, I think, what is essential for being church, is to embody the love of God. To be community in such a way that those involved know and experience, that we look at each other through the eyes according to the description that we find here in the passage that we listened to. That Jesus, who looked at the crowds, had compassion on them. And for those that felt harassed and those that had it difficult, that he looked at them and that he shared with them God's unconditional acceptance and God's love. And that he just didn't look at them, but he also did for them. How many of these healings described were indeed miraculous healings, we have no way of knowing. But that's not the point. Jesus' healing presence among his disciples and his followers, but also in the world, was such that a few generations after he walked the earth, this is the testimony that lived on. That he had compassion on the world, that he had a healing presence, and that he made people and situations whole wherever he went. And that is the kind of community that I think we would call ourselves followers of Jesus, should also express. That we can do through filling in that spreadsheet and the shifts to be worked. Because what we do there impacts, for instance, one of our missions that we support, rural preventures in southern India, where we directly impact the lives, especially of women in the very poor communities in southern India. We can also, by being the people that God calls us to be and following the example of Jesus, be the people to one another that enables us, sometimes through actions and through words and through a presence that we have no intent of making a difference with, where it happens, because we are present in the Spirit of Christ. And there is ample opportunity for that as well at the fair booth and in the kitchen, where we do mundane things, but that have a sacred purpose, and that really makes a difference to the lives of people across the world, but also often to people that we work with and serve with. And therefore, let the fair and all the hours that go in there, let it fill in for us also the gap between our own existence and being the kind of community that follows in the footsteps of Jesus, where it is a place for healing, for making people whole, a place where we can find direction in a world that is quite often upside down these days, and a place where we can work and serve together to continue to impact the world that we are part of and globally connected to. May God help us to be that kind of community. And my last request, if you haven't filled in a spot, please do that. If fair was not your thing up to now, make it your thing. And follow in my example, harass your neighbors. To bring more community members to be involved in this beautiful project as well, so that together we can be God's people, living with the ideal of God's kingdom in our hearts and expressing it through what we do. Amen.